Hey friends, it's Dory here for Gamereactor at Gamescom 2016, and I've been taking a look at the, Divinity Original Sin 2, and DOS. What? There's plenty of new stuff. I only saw the presentation for 40 minutes. It felt like you could have gone on for 2 hours and been telling me new stuff the entire time. Can you touch upon the big pillars? What's new in Divinity 2?
We could have gone on for 40 hours. So the big changes that we are presenting here at Gamescom are the origin stories and also the races. So what we want to prove is that, and show you and illustrate, is that the origin stories that you select and the races that you select really do affect the world, and they change the way that people react to you. So that's the origin stories and the races. We are also coming up with extra stuff to do in combat. For instance, we now introduced verticality. You can climb ladders to get bonuses, for instance, in range or damage. You can get penalties if you're trying to attack a guy that's standing higher than you are. We are coming up with new surfaces, new surface interactions. You can now bless and curse surfaces. So we are not only identifying the strengths of the previous game and just making sure that those are still in. We are not afraid to experiment with everything, make changes here and there, and also make new things, make improvements, and introduce new features such as those.
Yeah, that's a lot of information there. Let's break it down one by one, starting with the origin stories. Some people may have said that while Divinity Original Sin was a great game, maybe one of the aspects that was a little bit lacking was the story, but you are pumping that up with the origin stories. And you have a main quest line and of course side quests, but with the origins, if you choose one of the pre-made characters there, it kind of twists into, you have your own personal quest line.
Right. Yeah, that's right. When you do choose an origin story, so for the role players out there, you don't need to select one. You can still choose a generic guy, and then you just say like, he doesn't have a history, or I came up with my own one. But if you do select an origin story, these are people with their own history. They have their own fears and losses. They have their own personal quests. So indeed, right next to the main story, we introduced personal quests. So, for instance, if you choose Lose, which is a very funny girl until the demon that is in her takes over, and he literally sometimes does take over and forces your hand into doing things, or she takes over a dialogue and forces you to say things or attack people. So this is Lose, and obviously her personal quest is to try and get rid of the demon. So what we try to do is make the player care more for the characters, because like you said, in Original Sin 1, your characters did not really have any personality. You were just playing through the RPG part. You were looting, you were fighting, you were learning the normal story, but you did not probably care that much for your character unless you're a real role player and you came up with your own stuff. But this is something that we fixed with introducing these origin stories.
One thing that they showed off here in the presentation was the relationship between the Red Prince and I forget her name. Sabine, the elf that had previously been a slave to the lizard race, and when you are playing with somebody, you both get these personal quests. You can't see each other's personal quests, so you could work together until there's a backstab.
Yeah. So what you have going is a co-op game with PvP elements if you want to. So indeed, if you're playing in multiplayer, for instance, if you are playing the Red Prince and I'm playing Sabine, first of all, the relationship between us will not be very good. So we will have joined forces in a party because we believe in strength in numbers. For instance, in the beginning of the game, you need to escape something, and you go like, well, if we join forces, we can probably have more chance to succeed in doing this. On the other hand, if you're the Red Prince, you want to become the emperor of the Lizard Empire again. And when I am Sabine, I will want to kill lizards that have slaves. So our personal goals are completely different, but our common goals are the same. And the cool thing about these origin stories is when you succeed in advancing your personal quests, because it's a string of quests, I will start failing mine. And at the end of the game, this will determine what the end of the game actually looks like. This will also determine not only what the end of the main story looks like, it'll also prove whether or not you succeed in becoming the emperor, or whether I can make my quest of vengeance come true or not.
Now, one thing that I wasn't sure on, when you select the origin story, does that also spec your attributes, or do you still have free reign to decide your strengths and where you want to spec in the like that?
Some origin stories will block you in gender and race. Some will leave you free in gender or race, but your character build, your presets, like your primary attributes, your abilities, your talents, and your skills are completely free for you to choose. When you do not choose these origin stories, they will get a preset from us, because, for instance, Sabine, we believe she's more of a sneaky character, more of a ranger character, so we're going to spec her for you like that, because the origin stories, as you've seen, that you don't select during character creation are available to you during the game, whether you're playing in single player or multiplayer, so that you can add them to your party, and then they will have a set character. But also, because a Divinity game has always been classless, this is also classless. You can still spec them to whatever you want. We will also still have the respecking mirror, just like in Original Sin 1, where you can just go to and completely change whatever you want.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about the story here. Where are we meeting the characters at the beginning of the game, and what is the overarching goal?
In the beginning of the game, you will find yourself stranded on an island. So we start on a beach again. We have something with beaches. We were thinking of calling it Original Sin 2, The Revenge of the Beach. But so again, you're on a beach. But it's very handy to start there, because we can one by one introduce all the things that the game does. A bit like a tutorial, but without it feeling like a tutorial. So and it's a bit linear. So why until you go into the ghetto? Now, sorry. Why are you stranded on a beach? In the beginning of the game, you are a source user, and there's this guy called Bishop Alexander, the ruler of that part of the land, and he thinks that source users are the cause of the land being attacked by Voidwoken, and Voidwoken are a sort of mythical monster. And he's going from town to town and picking up all the source users and going like, you need to go to this island and I will cure you of the source, because it is the source that attracts these monsters. So he's bringing you to some sort of an island, but you quickly realize, like, wait a minute, when you've been taken to this island, no one ever returns from it. So I don't want to be here. So it's a prison island. It's a bit like a leper colony. And he's experimenting with, like, okay, how do I get the source out of this guy? Let's try this. And actually, boom, someone explodes. And
Whoops, next.
yeah, so you go like, well, I don't think I want to stay here. So this prison island is also the thing that we're going to give to you in early access. And obviously, your first goal is to escape the island. And that's also your common goal as a party. Let's try and find a way out of the ghetto, out of the prison, away from Bishop Alexander. Now, I think that the cool part about this story is, up till now, Bishop Alexander is not this creepy evil guy. He's not your cliche fantasy trope. He thinks that what he's doing is right. He sees a problem, he identifies the cause, and he wants to fix it. Of course, he might be right, he might be wrong. Some people hate him for it, some people like him for it. Some source users are actually going to the prison island themselves, going like, I have source in me, please cure me. And other people are almost going to war against this Bishop Alexander. So once you escape the prison island, you will try to find out yourself what's going on with the Voidwoken, what's going on with Bishop Alexander. Also, Bishop Alexander is the son of the divine that has just died, and you want to see if there's another divine one somewhere, because Bishop Alexander sure as hell ain't. You know, so I cannot spoil too much about the story after the prison island, but that's what's going on in the beginning.
And of course, knowing Divinity, that's not just one way to escape off the island.
God, no. We try to prove during the presentation that your choices do matter. So depending on your race, depending on your origin stories, there are a couple of different ways to escape from the island. So it could be that when you are a lizard, some of the options are not even open to you, or not available to you, or going to be very hard to find them out. I think that we have 11 or 12 different ways of escaping the prison. itself. And why do we have so many different ways? First of all, the game is still very systemic. So sometimes we find ways. For instance, you can use teleportation, and we don't want to block the player of using teleportation anywhere. If you can use it, you should be able to use it there and here and there. So we found out that due to the way that the level is built, you can teleport one of your guys out of the prison. And when we find that out, we're not saying like, okay, let's make sure that you can teleport here. No, it's like, oh, that's a cool way. First of all. Second,
mark it down. We found another one.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's indeed what's happening. Only last week, I think, during one of the presentations for the press, someone got thrown in jail for doing something wrong. And as it so happens, escaping jail is easier than escaping the prison. So when you get thrown in jail, you're already one step closer to escaping prison. So yeah, we have a couple of different ways, class-based ways, origin ways. So yeah, for instance, when you're a dwarf, there's this little gate somewhere, and you can only fit through when you're a dwarf. Stuff like that.
Nice. Now a couple of more things that I want to touch upon. First of all, of course, seeing as this is the sequel, you are pumping the graphics up. But I also want to talk about some of the new gameplay mechanics, like you mentioned before, with the surfaces and blessings and curses on those.
So yeah, you're right about the graphics. So this is still our in-house engine. It's an engine built for top-down RPGs, for turn-based RPGs. It's not something that we had to learn how to work with it and then try to cram an RPG in there. And we keep on improving it. So on a technological front, we also want to, look forward into 2016 and beyond, because the game is going to come out in 2017. So it needs to be up to snuff compared to what all the other guys are doing. So we are now at our in-house Divinity Engine 3.0, we call it, because we now have physical-based rendering, we have cloth simulation, we have an improved animation system, and we have a better particle effect system. So, and that makes the game look a lot better, a lot sharper. So this also allowed us to choose a different art direction. It's now a bit more realistic, a bit more gritty, which goes together well with the story, which has also become more serious. And for instance, we don't stop with making technological and technical improvements. We also, as you said, for instance, we are coming up with new surfaces, new surface interactions. For instance, blessing and cursing, surfing. Blessing and cursing is really cool because, for instance, someone casts a fire surface under you and you can go like, well, that's not good, I'm burning up here, and you can just bless it, and then it turns into a blessed fire surface, which actually heals you, and it stops you from being frozen. So you cannot get the status of being frozen anymore. But then the other guy can just curse it again, then it turns into a normal fire surface, and if you curse it again, it turns into a necro fire surface, which is a cursed fire surface, which cannot, there's the Sodom song, and it's like the fire that doesn't burn, I forget, but you cannot douse necro fire with water. You need to bless it again, because otherwise it doesn't go over. So there's lots of cool things like that we added.
There was one thing in the presentation where we dropped a rain of blood, and then because the enemies were hit and bled out into that, they cursed the surface, and then they threw poison on it. So it ended up being like poison acid blood.
Poison acid blood with a poison cloud that could be electrified, and sometimes stuff happens and stuff blows up, and we don't even know what just happened, but it all just fits because it's, like I said, also the surface system is a system, it's systemic. So sometimes, and this is why I think that combat in our game is so much fun, it's so volatile. Stuff happens that you can't predict just because everything starts reacting with everything.
Now, you mentioned that the demo will be out soon to early access users. When is that, and is there a projected release date for the full game?
Well, it's not really a demo. The first prison island is coming to Steam Early Access on September 15th. It will allow you to play with the origin stories that we have written up till now. It will allow you to find all the different ways out of the prison. You can probably finish this island in like 8 to 12 hours. But you can replay it to see like what we are doing to the different origin stories. We will, just like we did with Original Sin 1, we will keep this thing up to date. We will look at the community and listen to what the fans are saying. Because we are trying out new things. So we're trying out a new RPG system. We want to have some feedback on that, for instance. The rest of the game will be released later next year.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.